Winona Todikini was born in 1808. She is the second child of Eleanor and Coco Todikini. In 1836, she met a man named Paco Dasan. They were married that year, where Winona moved in with him and his family. She lived there with his mother, father, and younger sister. Winona settled quite well in her new home. In 1837, she discovered she was expecting. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Tayanita. Tayanita was the firstborn on both sides of the family, so everyone was excited to meet her. Winona brought her along for their nightly storytelling by the fire. At home, Paco's family helped with the baby as much as they could. They were a big help. That next year, Winona's older sister Muriel was having a baby. Winona had come over to support her during the labor. When everyone left to investigate her father's incident, Winona agreed to stay with her sister. Her sister had a very difficult birth, and she didn't want her to feel any more stress, but she was extremely worried for her father. After Muriel went to sleep, she waited for everyone's return. Muriel's husband had come back and told her her father did not make it. Winona was devastated and blamed Onakona for him being out there in the first place. Onakona argued with her as if his excuse was reasonable at all. Eleanor stopped them before the argument could get any louder. Winona hated how calm she was. She told Winona to go home and get some rest. But Winona could not sleep that night, knowing her father was gone. Paco was there to comfort her in her grief. The death was really hard on her. After her father's passing, Winona stayed at home for a while. She would only visit her family on certain occasions. She loved her family and wanted her daughter to spend time with them. But Winona was still upset with her brother. She blamed him for her father's death. Still, she didn't let her feelings get in the way of spending time with everyone else. Later in 1840, Winona had another baby girl. Her name was Chilali. She introduced her to the family, while Taya and her cousin Chaska got to play together. They also had their first night of storytelling since Coco's passing. In 1842, Winona was pregnant once more. She had given birth to twins, Ohanzees and Shilahs. With 4 small children running around, there was never a boring day. Winona was slowly starting to come around the family again. She missed spending time with them. She spoke to Ona for the first time in years and apologized for her behavior. Ona was relieved to hear that and forgave her. For the first time in years, everyone was able to enjoy each other's company without any tension. With all the love they share for one another, the family was whole once again. Tayanita Dasan was born in 1837. She is Winona and Paco Dasan's first child. Growing up, she was surrounded by love. Her and her sister would often visit their cousin Chaska and play games. They'd come home just before their grandparents finished preparing dinner. Then they'd play with their dolls before bedtime. Tayanita would always have her dolls fall in love. She wanted the kind of love her parents had. When she was older, she would go into town with her sister and search for love. One night she found what she was looking for. A man by the name of Oak Smith had caught her eye. They started spending a lot of time together. Tayanita made the first move. As things were getting serious, she introduced Oak to her parents. When she wasn't in the room, Oak had asked their permission to marry her. They happily accepted. In 1856, Tayanita and Oak were married. They moved into a small home in the same neighborhood she grew up. They were very happy together. Tayanitas' dream of finding love had come true. In 1860, she discovered she was pregnant. Oak wasn't excited to hear the news. She tried to reassure him, but he was still upset. Despite his feelings, Tayanita couldn't wait to meet her little one. Her family was also excited for her. Even though Oak wasn't thrilled about the pregnancy, he was still there for her. He was even there during the labor. He hated seeing her in such agony. He helped as much as he could. After the birth, Oak took care of the baby while Tayanita rested. He tried to bond with the baby, but it was difficult. Tayanita's parents had come over to help him until she was better. Parenting was much easier for her. She loved her child unconditionally. As the months went on, their little girl had grown. Her name was Elena. The family adored her. Tayanita wanted Oak to bond with Elena, so she would leave him alone with her. After a while, Oak had grown to adore her. Tayanita was happy to see them bonding with each other. As the years went on, their bond grew stronger. She was Daddy's favorite girl. They were a happy little family. In 1868, Tayanita and Oak were expecting once more. This time they were both happy at the news. Elena was excited too. Months later, they welcomed another little girl into the world. Her name was Sina. Elena loved to play with her. They were a tight-knit family. At the end of every night, after dinner, and the girls were tucked in, Tayanita would thank Oak for how far he's come. Then they would sit out and watch the stars until they fell asleep. Shilahs Legacy was born in 1840. She is Winona and Poco Dasans' second child. As a child, she was very adventurous. She loved to go off on little adventures by herself. When she was 10 years old, her aunt Enola had come back from a trip out of the country. She told Chilali how different and fun it was to be somewhere new. Chilali was so intrigued. She begged her aunt to take her the next time she went. Unfortunately for her, her parents wouldn't allow it. But she would never forget all the incredible things she heard. In 1860, at 20 years old, Chilali decided to go overseas and see the world. She said her goodbyes to her family before going on her way. It was even better than she imagined. Everything about the country was exciting. There were many beautiful sights and monuments. There was always something new to see. Chilali happily made herself a home. She had friends who taught her their language and culture. She even had a boyfriend. They lived together in a small apartment. They were happy. But things weren't perfect. Chilali had caught him in bed with another woman. So she ended things. She moved away and eventually found someone else. This new relationship was much better than her last. She was showered with love and jewels. His name was Komarosan Abdullah. In 1863, the two of them were married. She moved into his lovely estate. Komarosan spoiled her with his riches. Every day he would buy her flowers, jewels, and garments. He would also sing to her. She loved his voice. In 1865, they were expecting their first child. They had a little girl named Odia. She was their little bundle of joy. Parenting was an adventure of its own. The next year, in 1866, they had another little girl. Her name was Aria. Then, in 1867, Shilali had one more girl named Minu. Since the girls were close in age, they always had someone to play with. Ohanzees Dasan was born in 1842. He is Winona and Poco Dasan's third child. He had a good upbringing. He spent a lot of quality time with his family. As he got older, his sisters had moved out and gotten married. Ohanzees and his twin brother, Shilah, were still at home with their parents. They helped around the house. In 1862, Winona and Poco were bedridden by an illness. They died later that year. Ohanzees and Shilah were left with the house. It was a lot quieter without their parents. They spent more time out with their cousin Chaska. Shilah would sometimes bring girls home. Ohanzees was impressed with how many women he could swoon. Shilah gave him some advice on picking up girls. The next time they went out, he gave it a try. He introduced himself to a woman named Gloria. She agreed to go home with him. Ohanzees was happy to spend a night with a pretty girl. But it became so much more than that. Shilah had soon moved away and gotten married. In 1867, Ohanzees and Gloria were married. That same year, they found out they were expecting. A few months later, they had a son. They named him Colleen. Ohanzees loved his baby boy. He made them both so happy. Ohanzees would bring him to his sisters to play with his cousin Zena. They had many play dates. Through the years, Ohanzees and Gloria would try for another baby, but were unlucky. Although they were disappointed, they were grateful to have Colleen. They made the most of their only child and cherished every moment with him. They went out a lot. One day, while Ohanzees and Gloria were napping, Colleen had wandered off. Nobody noticed him go into the sea until it was too late. Colleen Dasan had passed away in 1870. He was 3 years old. His death had affected the entire family, especially his parents. They were really struggling with his loss. There were pieces of him everywhere. There wasn't a place they weren't reminded of him. Ohanzees' siblings had come over to help with anything they needed. Gloria would sleep most days. Other times she would find herself in Colleen's room, playing with his toys. It soon became too painful to remember him, so they got rid of his things until there was nothing left of him. After a few years, they had found hobbies to keep themselves busy. They had also got a dog. His name was Ruger. The days weren't so hard anymore. They would still mourn Colleen, however. Despite their pain, their love never drifted, and it never would. In 1919, Ohanzees and Gloria finally reunited with their son. Shilahs Dasan was born in 1842. He is Winona and Poco Dasan's fourth child. Shortly after his parents had passed, he and his twin brother would go out and meet people. Shilah was really good at charming the ladies. Sometimes he'd bring them home for the night. Eventually, one of them revealed she was pregnant. Shilah was surprised but ready for parenthood. It was her who wasn't. Her name was Allison, and she was not happy at all. They were married in 1865 and moved into Allison's family estate. Throughout the entire pregnancy, she refused to speak to Shilah. She was always drinking. She had later given birth to twins, Iris and Dakota. After the birth, Allison's behavior had become worse. While Shilah was struggling to care for 2 babies at once, she was drinking her life away. Her drinking sometimes made her unpredictable. In the mornings, Shilah would leave for work as a laborer. That left Allison alone with the children. Shilah would come home after a long day to find that his children had been neglected. He would argue with Allison for not caring for the kids, but she brushed him off. Shilah had no choice but to hire a nanny. Having a nanny was incredibly helpful. He finally had the time to take care of himself again. He expressed his gratitude for her in many ways. As the children grew older, they encountered their mother a lot more. Allison would go out of her way to destroy anything that belonged to them, leaving Shilah to fix whatever she broke. He tried his best to protect them from her, but he had no control over what happened while he was at work. Luckily for the children, their nanny was always there for them. Shilah was forever grateful. Soon Allison had started to suspect they were having an affair. When she discovered the truth, she was infuriated. After beating the nanny, she fired her. Later that night, the couple got into an argument. Allison had been drinking. He explained that the nanny was the only one who helped with the children, but Allison didn't care. She told him the children would be better off dead. She blamed Shilah for her misery. By then, the children were used to hearing her say such things. But Allison was so angry. She kicked Shilah down the stairs. He landed in front of his kids. They were only 7 years old. Shilah was horribly injured, but he could have been saved. All Allison had to do was get help. But she never did. Shilah passed away in 1872. He was buried at a local cemetery. Because of how far they lived, his family didn't even know that he died. His children were now left with no one but their wicked mother.